I didn't do as well as I thought I did this month. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria. If you are new here, please consider subscribing down below and hitting that bell icon so that you are notified every time that I post, and give me a big thumbs up to let YouTube know that you like my content. Today, we're going to be talking about my February wrap-up and go through my thoughts and feelings and some statistics about the month as a whole. The first book that I ended up finishing in the month of February was the book club pick for Leaves in Literacy, which is the local book club in my town, which was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I had originally picked this up, I think in like 2023, but I was in a really dark time in my life that the story that I was getting from them just wasn't what I needed at the time, so I had put it down. And I didn't actually know if I was going to pick it back up again at any point, but because book club essentially forced me to pick it back up again, I'm so glad that it did. I gave this book 5 stars. I absolutely adored it. If you like video games in any capacity, then I highly recommend this. I feel like it does show the thought process behind making video games, and so now when I look at my favorite video games, I start to try and think about the thought processes that the developers had at the time. We follow a group of 3 college students in this book, kind of from childhood-ish for a couple of them, and then all the way into their 40s as they are developing this company and this game and the life decisions that they make along the way. This, I would say, has a lot of conversations on relationships and what is considered either toxic or non-toxic, and just friendly relationships as well, because there's some level of romantic relationship between some of our characters, but there's also just the conversations of the type of love that you have for a friend that I think that is not ever sought after in a novel where your 2 main characters are a boy and a girl who go make video games. You would assume that they end up together. I'm glad that we had that sort of distinction, that it didn't have to be happily ever after. I would say to check trigger warnings for this. There were a few things that I know that some people might find triggering. There's abusive relationships on page. There's technically there's also one more thing that it is a spoiler, but I would highly suggest looking for trigger warnings on this. But please pick this up. I am so glad that book club got me to pick this back up again, because I don't know where I would be if I hadn't finished this book. It was like I had a death wish after Tomorrow, because the next book that I ended up picking up was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. Picking up 2 heavy books back to back was probably not my best course of action, but it needed to be done. This was also a book club pick for the one that I have made with my friends here. We all decided to read it all at the same time, and it was a great, fun ride. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I may not keep it at 5 stars. It was probably more of a 4.5, but I still enjoyed it enough that it was way better than Iron Flame. Riddick really carried this book for me, and all of the side characters really carried this for me, because I know that the whole point is the relationship between Violet and Xaden, but I feel like, yes, the side characters could have been developed a little bit more, but we still got to see more of them in this book, and I'm so happy for it and so glad for it, because they were missing from the previous books because we were only focusing on them, and a great story needs to have its side characters as well. Riddick definitely is my favorite part of this entire book. He made me laugh out loud so many times, and that's what I would say about this book, is that it's just so funny. And not just Riddick, I would say even just some one-liners that come up on here that are just hilarious. I will say that this book is not without its flaws. There are a few things that I probably it could have been from the way that I was reading it. I was going through a training for work where we only had 10-minute breaks every couple of hours, and so I would read a chapter in those 10 minutes, and so my reading of it, at least for the first half, was very sporadic. And so there was a time where I kind of zoned back in, or what it felt like, and I went, well, how did we get here? Like, did I forget something? Did I miss something? How did we get here? Because it was just how I was reading it, so I can't really tell whether or not that was a fault on the book or if it was my fault for not being able to be fully engaged because of my training that I had at work. So I do eventually want to reread the series as a whole. I might wait until we have all of the books because I don't want to have to keep rereading and keep rereading and rereading. So eventually I will reread the whole thing and be able to see all of the little breadcrumbs that are left in all of the books that lead us to where the story ends up going, to see how well it was actually defined and developed. My next book was a library book that I have already returned, which was Binti. I have already read by this author before. I had read Kata Witch, and I really, really enjoyed it. So when I saw this at the library, I absolutely had to pick it up. I initially didn't realize how short it was when people were just talking about it, but when I looked it up and it was only 90 pages, I was like, you have to be kidding me. So I used this as a way to come off of Onyx Storm with a short little novella that would be able to push me on and continue reading. I really did enjoy this novella. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I will say that I think I honestly need to reread it because it felt like it went by so quickly that, again, I just felt like I zoned in and out and I was like missing half the story, but that's probably, again, my fault. But I still really, really enjoyed it. I do think that there's a certain level of skill that you have to be able to have that story arc within that so many short of pages, that I greatly applaud her for being able to do that in this story. This follows a girl who goes off to a is it like a military college? I guess you could say it's like a space college. It's sci-fi. That she is one of the only people from her tribe that is going to be going to this college, just because she's really, really good at math. In transit, as they're going on the spaceship and going to the university, the ship gets attacked, and it's about our main character and her life on the ship afterward. And so I highly recommend it if you want just a really quick sci-fi story. I'm really wanting to pick up the rest of the series, so I'll probably pick them up either at my library or just through audiobook because they are so short. I don't remember what the next one is called, but I am going to be looking for it as many times as I have to go look at the library for it. After that, I did have another library book checked out, which was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I only got 200 pages in, and if you saw my Valentine's Day vlog, which I'll tag up in the cards, it was a complete disaster. Brandon Sanderson's writing takes me twice as long to read. It's just so dense that there's a lot that I don't want to miss, and so I'm actually actively trying to pay attention. That just made it take so long to read. And unfortunately, I had to take it back to the library because it was already past due, and I felt really bad for not being able to keep it longer. So initially, I had said, oh, I just have to get the page, or I think I said 250 or at least halfway through the book, and then I was going to switch to a romance so that I can get that dopamine hit and keep going. Well, I read my romance, which I'll talk about here in a second, but when I went back to Well of Ascension, I just couldn't do it. So I didn't even get halfway through. So I'll try again soon because I am really, really enjoying it. It's not anything on the content of the book itself. It's literally just the time frame of which me checking it out from the library is. It has to be a book that I read slowly. It can't be a book that I try and binge or read. I have to read it along with something else because it's just so much to be able to pick it up. I will probably have to purchase these because I feel bad for having to keep rechecking it out from the library. But the romance book that I ended up picking up in the middle of reading Well of Ascension was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I adored this book so much. I literally read it in what felt like one sitting. I loved it. But this follows August and Jane, who meet on the subway, and it is their romance story. But I can't really tell what to be able to say that's not a spoiler with this. But August is a transplant to New York City, and she is just trying to find her way in life. She's a 23-year-old just trying to find her space, and I know that I said it in my reading vlog, but this is a great combination between the TV show with Billy Porter, I think it's called Pose, and Friends. It's literally just queer friends. Like, that's literally what this book felt like to me, and I absolutely adored it. There was sci-fi elements to this that I really enjoyed. I don't know if I've ever read anything like this before when it came to the sci-fi tropes that were in here. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it if you want sci-fi, sapphic romance. It's more heavy on the romance than it is the sci-fi. Like, sci-fi is just a way for the story to be able to take place, but I really, really enjoyed it. And the last book that I ended up reading in the month of February took me 8 days to read. It was kind of a bad idea to pick this up after trying to read Well of Ascension. So I put down a 700-page book or a 500 to 600 page book to pick up another 600, 700 page book, which was When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I buddy read this with Donatella and Lexi. I don't actually know if at this point if they've finished it or not. I haven't reached out to them. I literally finished this on the last day of February. I had to absolutely be able to fit it in to my statistics for this month because look at this monstrosity. It was so big. There was so many things that I have issues with. I gave this book 2 stars. I don't do that very often. I'm a very generous star rater, as you can tell from all the other books that I rated this month. Like, all 3 of these I gave 5 stars. So for a book to get 2 stars for me is saying something. Granted, I would be willing to pick up the next one. I know that it's going to be coming out in the fall of this year, so I would be willing to pick it up. Granted, I would be a little afraid if it's this many pages, because one of the gripes that I had with this was that there was too much going on. There was so many like arcs within here that just would get resolved, but then not really, and then everything was just left to be open-ended, and I didn't feel like I got a good complete story. There was a few things that did get wrapped up like literally within the last few pages that I was like, okay, I'm willing to, that's why I'm willing to pick up the next one, because I'm kind of now interested in what's happening. There was just so many things. One of my biggest icks with this is that they call them, like, when they're referring to the opposite sex, they refer to them as either male or female. And the way that it's used is just really, like, that's fine and dandy, but it's just really annoying in the way that it was used. I was trying to talk to my best friend about it, and I was telling him that she was going to one of the guards, and she was describing them of like, oh yeah, both of these males are have really long hair and I don't know what, and I walked up to the male on the right and whatever. Like, why did you have to say male in that instance? You literally could have said, I walked up to the guard on the right. You've already described them as male. Why do you have to do it again? Like, I was just like, what? Or like, I understand that it was part of some of the trials that she goes through in this thing, or in this story, where like, there are 2 men who are like trial by combat to try and like win her affections or whatever, and she refers both of them as males, but in that context it makes sense. It's just, and then there's parts of it that like didn't even fully explain that they were fae until more than halfway through the book. Like, what? Yes, I understood that they had powers, but humans can have powers. Like, that could be any story that you read, is that humans can have powers, but they didn't fully explain that they were fae until it needed to. Or the fact that there are multi-perspectives in this book, but they were only needed, or they were only there when they were needed. Like, most of the time it was from our one main character's perspective, and then for like 10 chapters it'd be that one perspective, and then there'd be like the one of the guy main character, then it'd be 10 of the same girl again, and then it would be like one of the side characters got a perspective, and then it would be the main character again. Like, just when it was convenient did they have to add like another perspective to like continue on the plot in the story. And I don't know whether or not I liked that. There was just so many things that I could go on and on and on about it, and go even more in a spoilery sense, because there was a lot of the little details that really irked me and annoyed me. So it would have to get a lot better for me to pick up the second one, to be honest, but I am interested enough in the story. The concept was there, the execution for me just wasn't. Now that we got all of the nitty-gritty out of the way, I wanted to talk about a little bit of my statistics. And as you can tell, I've read 5 books this month, and the total amount of pages that equated to was 2,121 pages. I am really, really happy about that, especially because one of the books was 90 pages long. As you can tell, this was a pretty chunky stack. When the Moon Hatch really carried on that front. But I'm also going to be showing my little genre pie chart that shows that my romance was actually really high, but that's because I separate whether or not they even include romance. And so if you look at the stack here, I think I may have counted all of these having a romance, or maybe not with Tomorrow, I'm not sure, but other than that, the other 3 did. Binti did not have any romance in it, so that probably is accounted for in here, but romance is not normally my super strong in the lead. It's normally just fantasy, but I guess because I'm reading a lot of romantasy, it'll be up there as well. The next graph is going to be showing how I acquired the books, or where I sourced some of the like audiobooks and things. I read most of the time. My reading is mostly immersive, so I have not only the physical book but the audiobook as well. And so in this graph it shows whether or not it was a buddy read, if I got it from Scribd or Libby for my audiobooks, and then whether or not I owned it or purchased it within the if I hauled it, it's been within like the past couple months. I would probably say within the last 6 months I would be considering it a hauled book, because if it's been sitting on my shelf for more than 6 months, then I would consider it that I owned it at that point. But I would say from this stack I had owned pretty much most of these except for Onyx Storm, and then Binti, of course, was a library book, which is also showcased on the graphic. The next one is just going to be the audiences, or the people that these books are marketed towards, and as you can tell, it's mostly adult. I didn't read any middle grade this month, so it's just adult and YA, which I think that only Binti was considered YA as of Goodreads. I think everything else was considered adult. So I can totally see myself pulling away from YA a little bit, and especially can be seen from this graphic. Even though I had 3 5-stars this month, my average rating was a 4.2 because of the 2-star of When the Moon Hatched brought it down so much. Unfortunately, that's just how it happens, but I'm glad that I'm still in like a 4-point range. I rarely dip below a 4.0, but that's just because I am very generous with my rating systems, and if I know that a book is probably gonna get below a 2 or even a 2, I usually DNF. The only reason why I continued reading this book was because I was reading it with my friends and doing a buddy read. So I wanted to be able to have a full understanding of what I was discussing with them, rather than just saying, oh, I DNF'd and I gave up. But if I'm just reading for fun, I will DNF a book, and I don't really have a way to take that into account, but I guess I could start putting a DNF as a 1-star, depending on how far into the book I DNF'd it at. So technically, I'm not considering the Well of Ascension as a DNF, because I know that I will get back to it eventually. I just have to give it back to the library, and that's not necessarily my fault. If you have read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments. I want to know your thoughts on them. If you agree with me on anything or if you disagree, because I know that there is some discourse around Onyx Storm that you may not agree with my thoughts. Please let me know how you enjoyed them, and thank you so much for watching. If you got this far into the video, please leave me a dragon emoji because I have 2 dragon books. So thank you so much for watching.